Okay, welcome on board for this short teaching video, which is part of a series of teaching videos that the Tenant Farmers Association is putting together with some high-level information and advice covering a host of issues impacting farm tenancies. Now, in this session, we're going to be looking at the whole area of the new range of environmental schemes that we are expecting to see coming down the line, both in England and a bit later in Wales, and what landlords can and cannot do under the terms of tenancy agreements. So please note that this is being recorded in August 2022, and the information that we are providing relates to what was known at the time of that recording. So before I start today's session formally, I should say that this forms part of a video library of information that's available from the Tenant Farmers Association. And you can get that all on our YouTube channel. So if you've come across this because you've Googled something about new schemes, then go to our YouTube channel. You've got a host of information there that the TFA has put up. And you can also subscribe so you can be notified when new material is published. And we're extremely grateful to Barclays Agriculture, who have sponsored our webinar and video series for the past couple of years, and they are continuing to do so up until the end of the year. So that's great to have them on board. So as I say, today we're looking at the landlord-tenant implications for some of the new agri-environment schemes that are coming down the line. And we will be looking at what landlords can and can't do and what landlords can and can't insist upon. I'm delighted today to have TFA advisor Kathleen Walton on the line with me, and she's going to be covering those main issues. So hi, Kathleen, thanks for being on board, and please lead us through on the information.
Thank you, George. Do appreciate it. So as George said, today I'm going to be covering the question of can landlords insist I participate in environmental schemes? A hot topic, increasingly important. So why is it happening now? Why is it becoming more relevant? To start off with, we're looking at the 25-year environment plan, which UK government launched in 2018. So at that time, they made their pledge of 30 by 30, which is 30% of land in England to be included in biodiversity by 2030. And they intend to do that through habitat creation, through management long-term of existing habitat, and protection for wildlife-rich species and habitats. And in 2021 then, that we looked at the agricultural transition plan again in England. And as we all know, that direct payments are going to be reducing, and that's going to continue to be phased out until the end of 2027. So up until 2024, we're looking at around about a 50% reduction in our direct payments. So obviously income is going down, that there is an increased interest in public money for public goods, and that government, instead of making these direct payments, are routing their budget towards the environment, improvement of animal health and welfare, and reducing carbon emissions. Can we go on to the next slide, please, Julia? Thank you. So at the moment, we are looking at a few schemes that are available. We have the environmental land management schemes. Included in that are sustainable farming incentive, which is available now. So the window for that is open, and farmers have the opportunity to apply to that. And they are concentrating at the moment on soils and the standards of soils, and also animal health and welfare. But there will be more standards that are coming on stream. The England Woodland Creation Offer is available up until 2024. It's likely that that's going to be subsumed into local nature recovery, which is going to be very much akin to countryside stewardship and looking at food production alongside nature recovery. So England Woodland Creation Offer is going to be available until that point, and then subsumed into that. And then the third scheme available under ELM is the landscape recovery, which is a much more larger project, probably less likely to be come across by tenants. It's very much things at landscape scale. And then there are other environmental schemes like farming in the protected landscapes, capital grants that are available for farmers depending on the areas that they're in, and that is to cover things like hedgerows and air quality, water quality. And it's likely that we're going to see more of those coming forward. Things like the Slurry Investment Grant will be coming in autumn 2022. And we're also then seeing an increased interest from the private sector as well on things like natural assets and biodiversity net gain, carbon emissions. So we're seeing an increased interest from landlords in undertaking audits on their own natural assets and where their carbon emissions are coming from and how that might be mitigated. So which is increasing the number of queries that were coming from tenants on whether they need to provide information to landlords that would help inform these audits, whether they need to participate in environmental schemes, whether if they want to participate and their landlord refuses consent, what their options might be. So a whole range of different questions that we've got coming in from our members. Next slide, please, Julia. Thank you. So where can I get more information on this? Most recently, the TFA and the CLA issued some joint guidance for tenants and landlords entering into environmental schemes, and that's very much looking at a cooperative or a collaborative approach to it. And we also have webinars that we have undertaken and will be coming up as well, and there are some links on the screen in front of you for that. As always, though, if you have any questions, if you've got any queries at all, the best thing to do is to talk to a TFA advisor, and the number is on the screen. Call head office and somebody will be able to help.
So, Kathleen, there's clearly quite a lot to think about there with all those changes coming down the line, and people have got to get their heads around how they play out in the context of landlord and tenant situations. So just thinking about a situation where a tenant wishes to enter one of the government's new schemes, that the landlord, for whatever reason, refuses consent to go into a scheme because there's a condition in the lease which requires the tenant to grant the landlord to grant consent. Is there anything a tenant can do about that?
Well, I think the best thing to do in a lot of these circumstances is to check your tenancy agreement. So if there may be provisions in there which would require, which might actually suggest that the landlord doesn't need to provide consent. So best to have a look at that first. In those kinds of circumstances, though, you also need to make sure that whatever the term of your tenancy is, that it will go past the duration of the period of the scheme that you wish to enter, because otherwise the landlord may still need to sign a land ownership control form. So do look at that first. However, if there is something in there that suggests that the landlord does need to provide consent and they haven't provided that, and the reasons they've given are unreasonable, then you can look to make a formal objection to that lack of consent. And that can be done through Section 19A of the Agricultural Holdings Act 1986. So if you've got an AHA tenancy, you can do it through that route. And that was inserted by the Agriculture Act 2020. So essentially, if a landlord refuses consent for a tenant to be able to apply for a relevant financial scheme, then they are able to refer that matter to arbitration or for third-party determination if a landlord refuses consent. However, that doesn't apply for tenants who are enjoying a farm business tenancy, but the TFA are looking to, are lobbying government to extend that to tenants of farm business tenancies. Okay, so AHA tenancies might have a route if the landlord's refusal is unreasonable. At the moment, FBT tenants don't have a route, but like I said earlier, we would be looking to point people towards that guidance that the TFA and the CLA put together about how you work together on these things. So thanks for that. Mm-hmm. And in that vein, so we talked about can a tenant be refused consent? Can a landlord simply put land being farmed by a tenant into one of these schemes or into a potential woodland planting scheme? So there is no statutory provision for a landlord to be permitted to do that. So you're going to hear me say this a lot, but the best thing to do is to check the tenancy agreement to understand what rights the landlord might have reserved under that tenancy agreement to allow them to do an environmental scheme or to undertake tree planting. That's much more likely to be the case with newer farm business tenancies, particularly as the emphasis on environmental schemes move up. However, there may be something in there where the landlord has retained management control over something that has been done before. So if a previous tenant had an agri-environment scheme, then the landlord might wish to pass that obligation over. It could be that they've undertaken tree planting previously, and that's been written into the agreement, or the tenant might be required to manage that. So there could be any number of things in your tenancy agreement. So it is really to emphasise the importance of checking your tenancy agreement, one, before you sign it, but also if any of these questions arrive.
Okay, and just finally, Kathleen, so we talked there about can landlords go into schemes where the tenant is still farming the holding. What can I do as a tenant farmer if my landlord wants land back for tree planting purposes?
Okay, so the answer to that depends on what kind of tenancy you have. So the answers are different if you have an Agricultural Holdings Act tenancy or a farm business tenancy. But in both situations, again, the best thing to do is to check the tenancy agreement to understand what provisions, if any, have been made in there. That might be to do with a particular tree planting clause or not. For those under an Agricultural Holding Act tenancy, the landlord does have the provision to provide a notice to quit for tree planting. However, that matter would be referred to tribunal for them to make a decision on whether or not a reasonable landlord would require the land to be returned for that purpose. And that may be the case if the landlord was able to make an argument for sound estate management or with greater hardship, but those cases are very rare indeed. If it is a farm business tenancy, then it very much depends on what the content of the tenancy agreement states. However, you may want to think about whether or not how you feel about the tree planting. So is that tree planting going to be detrimental to the holding, to your farming operations, or is it actually not going to cause you too much of an issue? Could there be an opportunity to use that as a way to get consent for something else, or perhaps land swap if that's possible for better quality land? It's always worth having the conversation to understand what that might look like. And the other thing as well is that there is government restrictions on government schemes if landlords are resuming land from tenants to undertake tree planting as well. So there are some controls in place.
Okay, quite a bit to take in there, Kathleen, but I think we've got to leave it there for now. So thanks for sharing that information with us. So we hope you enjoyed tuning in to this short session. And as I say, watch out for others in the series. And don't forget to look out for all of the video material available on the Tenant Farmers Association YouTube channel. Now, if you're watching this in advance of our Autumn and Winter 2022 webinar program, we've got some really great sessions coming up. So we've got the report of the Tenancy Working Group, chaired by Baroness Kate Rock. She's hopefully going to be coming at the beginning of October to tell us what's recommended in that report. We're doing a second session on carbon and biodiversity net gain with Charles Cowa from Harper and Philip Mead, one of our recommended professionals. They did a session for us earlier. They're coming for a bit of a deeper dive on those issues and how they play with agricultural tenancies. And then towards the end of the year, we're hoping to have the DEFRA policy team back to give us a view on what we should expect in terms of some of those policy changes that Kathleen was talking about earlier. And if you're not a member of the TFA, you can get advice and information and support on a one-to-one basis from Kathleen and the other TFA advisors that we've got. The annual membership is only £220 per year, and you can join by going to the TFA website, and which is www.tfa.org.uk, and click the Join Here button, and you'll be taken through instructions about how to join the association. So thanks again to Barclays Agriculture for its kind sponsorship. Thank you to Kathleen, and thank you all for watching. Goodbye.